Well, let's go back to the life of David. Let us go back to the very end of yesterday's great victory over Goliath. And allow me to point out to you, dear brothers and sisters, that David, our hero, did not just suddenly go from being champion to becoming king. That would have been bad for David. And I know this may sound, maybe it'll sound illogical, but we actually need pain. I know you probably have enough of it yourself, or believe you have had enough of it, but I want to point out to you that in the life of this man that God says is a man after his own heart, there would be a significant amount of pain. He'll know pain in many forms, and so much of it is the result of broken relationships and consequently a broken heart. God will allow David's heart to be broken over and over. We left off at the end of chapter 17, so let's begin at chapter 18. It came to pass that when he made an end of speaking unto Saul, that the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David. And Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Saul took him that day and would not let him go. He would let him go no more home to his father's house. And then Jonathan and David, they made a covenant because he loved him as his own soul. Those kind of friendships are significant, and they also tend to be few. Perhaps you may have many friends. And I believe that within the family of God, there's this kind of love and brotherhood. I'm very, very grateful for. But you don't really have the opportunity to have shared experiences and discover a shared perspective with many, I should say, on the deepest level, as David and Jonathan did, Saul's son. Jonathan is a unique man because he is the sort of heir to the throne. If Saul was to have a dynasty, Saul, of course, will not have a dynasty because the Lord has rejected him. Jonathan is a unique man because he doesn't mind. It doesn't break his heart. As a matter of fact, if there were a championship belt, if David, following the slaying of the giant, and Jonathan being a witness of this. Now, I want to point out to you that Jonathan, though Jonathan has had his exploits, and Jonathan has experienced God moving him with great faith, and so that he and his armor bearer, they slew many of the enemies of Israel. On the occasion that David shows up to take on the challenge of Goliath, Jonathan was among the many up in the stands, not volunteering himself. And when he saw David not only step up to this great challenge, but this amazing victory, he saw that. David went, "Oh, I love this man." Jonathan, he said, "I love this man." And if there were a championship belt that he had from his previous exploits, Jonathan would have taken it off and gone up to David and put it on his waist. That was the heart of Jonathan. Jonathan was so impressed with David's faith, his courage that came from that faith, that his heart was immediately knit with him. It's a deep thing. Though there's no championship belt, there are, in fact, the robes of a prince. Verse 4 says, Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was upon him. He gave it to David and his garments, even to his sword and to his bow and to his girdle. What a statement. Isn't that a beautiful statement? You gotta love Jonathan, I do. Jonathan just goes, it's the gesture. You take my place. You're more worthy of this role. That kind of humility is seldom found on earth. Most people are in a perpetual competition, trying to win something. Jonathan instead sees David and just said, you win, man. You are the winner, and I will follow you where you lead. Well, the next thing we read, verse 5, and David went out whithersoever Saul sent him, and behaved himself wisely. So he had achievements. He demonstrated wisdom. And Saul set him over the men of war, and he was accepted in the sight of the people, and also in the sight of Saul's servants. So King Saul sees David rising in his greatness. He starts messing with his mind. Verse 6, it came to pass when they came, when David was returning from the slaughter of the Philistine, that the women came out of all the cities of Israel singing and dancing to meet King Saul with tabrets and with joy and with instruments of music. And the women answered one another as they played and said, Saul hath slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. And Saul was angry. He was very wroth, and the saying displeased him. And he said, they have ascribed unto David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed thousands. What can he have more but the kingdom? So Saul's envy begins, and it becomes the source of pain that will continue to afflict David for now years ahead. Not days, not weeks, not just a season. But for years ahead, he is going to suffer because of the madness of King Saul. But God, I am telling you, friends, family, I'm telling you, God used that pain. God would use that pain in David's life. And you and I, my dear friends, we will also have our pain. We have and we will. None of us are exempt. It's also not evenly distributed. In my opinion, you've probably heard me say this before. We all have pain. All of us have pain. I maintain that you who are women hurt more than we who are men. And you hurt more deeply. You have a greater capacity to feel that emotional pain. My heart goes out to you. There's nothing even about it. There's nothing that you can look at and call fair. But it is, as we say, what it is. And we all hurt. But God is there for us in our pain. And I also want to just present to you the thought that God allows it, that God could stop it. He could turn off the source of your troubles, but he does not. He's able to use it. I don't want to sound to you like I'm some expert on pain and suffering. I have to look at the recent years of my life, even the recent decades, and it has been largely pain-free, private, internal, nothing really worth talking about. I've been blessed, and I have known the goodness of God. I've known much mercy. I've experienced so much favor from him. But I can tell you, whether you believe me or not, that this particular old white man did in fact have the worst early years. And those early years were so painful that I did not want to live. I despaired of living. I wished to have not been born. The pain was great. And the sources of my pain were kind of like with David. It seemed, at least for the next few years, the majority of David's pain is because of one man. That was King Saul and his madness. In my case, it was because of my father, who has the same name as me, the other Ken Graves. He was such a selfish young man. He just threw his family away. He abandoned us. And he told us with his abandonment that we were not worth his love. And we were not worth his guidance. He left me alone to try to figure out answers for my sisters, for my mother. And I can tell you that God used all of that. He met me there in that awful pain. And he does such things. I can say to you that the source of my pain, almost every single thing about it, the poverty and the danger, the confusion, so much confusion, trying to figure out life, trying to fill in all these blanks, and there's so many blanks, trying to understand purpose of existence, and all of those things. All of that in my life was because of one man who could have done better, but he did not. But I can also testify to you that my true father, our father, my father and your father, he picked me up. He heard my cry. He took me in. He helped me by his word fill in the blanks. He still is. Called me. Oh, I love him. How could I not? He will, in fact, use pain in our life for good. Things that are not good will be used together for good. To those of us who love him and are called, I love him. So David's pain begins right here with this crazy worm that gets in Saul's head, Saul's brain. He's got a brain worm that's going to make him crazy. It's going to eat at him. He'll have moments of realizing he's crazy, but he won't be able to maintain that awareness. So it says right here from verse 9, Saul eyed David from that day and forward. He eyed him. He just kept an evil eye on him, watching with evil intentions. It came to pass on the morrow that the evil spirit from God came upon Saul, and he prophesied in the midst of the house, and David played with his hand as at other times, and there was a javelin in Saul's hand. And Saul cast the javelin, for he said, I will smite David even to the wall with it. And David avoided it out of his presence twice. So Saul, in his madness, thought that he could succeed at doing what Goliath could not. He wouldn't go out there and fight Goliath. David did. David killed him. And it's really eating at Saul, eating at him. And he decides in his madness on 2 occasions to use the javelin, thinking that he could actually succeed. David was slippery, and he evaded. David could move. David had reflexes, and blessed by the grace of God, he could evade the javelin and even put himself in javelin range again and evade again. But David starts to realize Saul does not like him at all. And so here, verse 12, Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with him and was departed from Saul. Therefore Saul removed him from him and made him captain over 1,000. And he went out and he came in before the people. And David behaved himself wisely in all his ways, and the Lord was with him. Wherefore when Saul saw that he behaved himself very wisely, he was afraid of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David because he went out and he came in before them. Saul said to David, behold, my elder daughter, Merab, her will I give thee. Only be thou valiant for me and fight the Lord's battles. Saul said, let not mine hand be upon him, but let the hand of the Philistines be upon him. So Saul's determination is that he will use Israel's enemies to kill David. And that's the reason why he promoted him, the reason why he sent him on these crazy missions. You know what's really terrible? I mentioned at the end of yesterday's study that awful chapter of David's life, 2 Samuel chapter 11. In that chapter, you realize David does the same thing. Isn't that ugly? That David does the same thing Saul did with him, and David sends a man to his death and uses Israel's enemies to murder him. I hate to get ahead of the story, but I don't want to miss this as we observe what Saul is intending to do. David will experience a chapter of his life where he even forgets this chapter of what Saul was doing with him, intending for him to die at the hand of the Philistines. Verse 18, David said to Saul, who am I? What is my life or my father's family in Israel that I should be son-in-law to the king? All that humility. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to point out to you that humility is an expression of faith. Faith is humble. Two things you got to know about faith. Number one, faith is humble. Number two, faith is persistent. Faith is humble and it persists. This will be demonstrated to us in the Gospels. It'll be demonstrated to us by a Syrophoenician woman, a Gentile lady, who comes in desperation to the Son of God, who seems reluctant to answer her desperate request, even ignoring her, and then seemingly insulting her. But he could not ignore her into giving up, and he could not sort of insult her. That statement where he said it's not right for us to give the children's food to the dogs. It seems very cruel until you remember that he knew what he was going to do before he did it, and that he, our king, was drawing out of her what faith really looks like. It is persistent and it is humble. He says it's not right to give the children's food to the dogs. She used a harder word than the kind word he used for dog. And she said, yeah, but the dogs get the crumbs. Dogs get the scraps from their master's table. And the Lord's heart was so moved, so moved. He knew that he could draw that out of her to, in a sense, challenge his Jewish disciples. She's a Gentile. This is not the first, but the second time they would go, would you look at that faith? He did the same thing with a centurion, where he said, I've not found faith like this. Not in Israel, not in the covenant people. Oh my. Faith does. Faith is humble and faith is persistent. David's humility was genuine. He did not, despite his great victory over the giant, and despite the promise of reward, that he'd be able to marry a princess, he didn't count himself worthy of that, even after his victory over that giant. Verse 19, but it came to pass at the time when Merab, Saul's daughter, should have been given to David, that she was given unto Adriel, the Mehoite, whatever, that guy, to wife. She was given to another guy, Adriel, the Maholiathite, whatever. But it came to pass, this statement, it came to pass. This is another chapter, and it starts with but. Things look like they're going to happen for David, but it came to pass that that girl was given to another. Verse 20, and Michal, Saul's daughter, loved David. It's an interesting choice of words. Michal loved him. There was a true romance ignited in her heart for David. And I believe that there was one also for David toward Michal. Well, they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. It pleased him. It pleased him because he goes, oh, this is good. This is good. So Michal, she loves him, does she? So now is my opportunity to kill him. Saul said, I will give him her. She may be a snare to him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him. Wherefore Saul said to David, thou shalt this day be my son-in-law in the one of the twain. Saul commanded his servants, saying, commune with David secretly, and say, behold, the king hath delight in thee, and all his servants love thee. Now therefore be the king's son-in-law. Saul's servants, they spake those words in the ears of David. And David said, seemeth it to you a light thing to be a king's son-in-law, seeing that I'm a poor man and lightly esteemed? He recognized that he, as a poor man, had no dowry. And what kind of dowry would be required to marry a princess? The servants of Saul so told him, on this manner spake David, and Saul said, thus shall you say to David, the king desireth not any dowry. He doesn't want any money, but 100 foreskins of the Philistines, to be avenged of the king's enemies. Saul thought to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. When his servants told David these words, it pleased David well. David suddenly goes, oh, I can afford this. This I can do. It pleased David. Interesting choice of words. The days were not expired. Wherefore David arose and went, he and his men, and slew of the Philistines 200 men. David brought their foreskins and gave them in full tale. Full count. Well, nothing says love like 200 Philistine foreskins. I always had this picture that David approaches with his men, sword in hand, and confronts Philistines with a proposition. Circumcision, boys. We can do this the easy way or the easier way. And then they just start killing them. And at some point or another, there's a harvesting of statements of love. I can only assume, and please forgive me for just pursuing this for a moment, but I think I must because it makes such a statement that you're going to get your hands dirty, and then you have to bring proof of your love. It's one thing to say I love you. I don't know about this Frenchman that Pastor Scott introduced me to. Millions of times wrote the same thing. All right, whatever. I was not inspired to a writing campaign. I think it's easier to say it than prove it. And David's like, I love Michal. So much I'm willing to risk my life, and I'm willing to get my hands dirty. But I will bring the proof of it. Not merely the eyewitness testimonies of the men that are with him. That's right, 200, king. We saw 200 dead Philistines. No, David brings the evidence of it back. And I know it's not a pretty thought. It is not. But the love that it expresses, you must not miss. So in some form or another, Philistine foreskins were preserved, probably on a skewer, salted. You got to prevent the rot. It's a dirty world. And much to Saul's absolute shock and horror, they are presented, ta-da! You can only imagine the king going, oh no! What is this you've gotten for me? I've avenged you. Vengeance upon Saul's enemies. What a statement. What a statement. Ugly, indeed. It's ugly, but it says love. Love will make you do things, friends. Love will make you do things that no amount, if you went up to David and said, I want you to go there and get your hands dirty on those Philistines or I'm going to kill you, David would say, kill me, I'm not doing that. Love will make you do things. You probably are aware, my dear Africans, that the majority of us Americans do not dance and cannot. Our culture has abandoned joyful dance. It really has, sadly. Dance has become so weird that most real men won't engage in it, what it's turned into. I speak for myself. I don't have any problem. I got rhythm. I can move. But what they do in our culture is long, celebratory dance is long gone. It's just been forgotten. Most of us come from Europe, and even the Vikings had dance. The Celts, they had their dances. The Jews, they have theirs. So the whole Mediterranean region, they know how to dance joyfully. Families all joining arms and just moving to the beat of the tempo of the song. Dance has become pretty weird. And I can tell you that I don't dance. Then one day my little girl came to me, and she was still a little girl, and she said, it's Valentine's Day, Dad. Will you take me to the father-daughter dance? Even now, as a grown woman, she cannot believe that day ever existed, that she wanted me to take her to a dance. But my response was immediate, no, I don't dance. That's not the kind of dad you have. I don't go and shake my body to music. I'm not going to do it. And I saw her shrink. I saw her wilt and just walk away. Oh, it broke my heart. Tore my heart right out of my chest, and I had this horrifying, Charles Dickens image in my head of, Valentine's future, where she doesn't like her dad and we're estranged. And it all goes back to that Valentine's father-daughter dance that I didn't care enough about her to take her to. Well, needless to say, the day came. I bought the tickets, and I told her. I took her to that dance. I still can't believe it. I took her. I remember getting out of the Jeep and walking against my will. Oh, I remember hearing the sound of, and I'm like, oh, this is repulsive, this whole thing. And I know it's gonna, but I'm dying to myself, man. I opened up that door, gave my ticket, and walked into a big banquet room full of fathers and daughters. Except all the daughters were short. They're little girls. And all you could see, it looked like a room of gay men all dancing together. Because the daughters were short. And a bunch of men in suits. In my heart, I went, no. But there was a little hand pulling me. And it pulled me right into the middle of all those fathers and daughters. And those men did not know how to dance. They looked stupid. All of them. They're all just doing this with their little girl. They looked stupid. And I joined them in looking stupid. I joined them in this, and it was so humiliating to me. But love will make you do things that no amount of law can make you do. It's kind of a theme of old cowboy movies where they shoot at a man's boots and say, dance! Bad guys do it. Dance! I would say, just shoot me and get it over with. I'm not gonna dance for you. I'll die like a man. But love will make you do things. Back to the foreskins. Love made a man do something. It's really unthinkable, isn't it? At least it's I can embrace it a little more because he killed him first, right? So then he got involved with the actual product that he was after. Boy, Saul, he's thinking, oh no, I can't get this man will not die. He just will not die. So Saul gave him Michal. Man, that verse, that 27th verse, it says David brought their foreskins and they gave them in full tale. So there's like 10 of them on a skewer, right? And there's 20 skewers. And Saul is horrified. But he's gonna do what he said, and Saul gave him Michal as his daughter to wife. And Saul saw and knew that the Lord was with David, and that Michal, Saul's daughter, loved him. That even Saul in his hate, Saul in his madness, could recognize love. He saw it in his daughter, but he was unmoved by it. Verse 29, and Saul was yet the more afraid of David. Saul became David's enemy continually. And the princes of the Philistines went forth, and it came to pass that after they went forth, that David behaved himself more wisely than all the servants of Saul, so that his name was much set by. How I wish I could just take you right through all of these verses. But the conspiracy, it begins and it continues, and David's life is constantly threatened. There would be heartbreak. There will be the separation of the truest friend. I want you to think about David. I don't know a whole lot about, his early years, but all indications are, unless it was another shepherd somewhere on the hills, he didn't have a whole lot of human friends, and all his friends were sheep. And finally, he's got a true friend, the truest of friends, a man that would give his life for him. And they're torn apart, and they have this awful, painful separation. They have this absolutely agonizing parting from each other, and they both wept. David, he has to leave Michal. He's got to flee for his life. She helps him escape, but he is also having to leave her. And all of this tears his heart out. And he does, in fact, he suffers. You look at the captions on your Bible, and it'll tell you over chapter 19, Saul seeks to kill David. Jonathan, he plays his part, trying to warn David. Michal, she plays her part, helping him escape. David, he has to go on the run. It begins. Jonathan in chapter 20 continues to remind David of his covenant, and he calls David to a covenant. And the most amazing thing in chapter 20 is Jonathan saying, I know what's going to happen. I know that God is going to keep you alive. Jonathan's got this faith. See, I'm telling you, that's what these men share. This faith that's mutual. Even when David's faith is low and he's at a point of such despair, Jonathan tells him, you're going to be the king. I know you'll be the king. But Jonathan was less certain about his future, Jonathan's, because he knew that the judgment of God was against the house of Saul and that line. Jonathan expresses his wish, you'll be the king and I will be your general. But knowing that it's likely that that dream won't come true, Jonathan's, it was so tearful. Jonathan says, just make me this promise. You promise me this. If I die, you will show the loving kindness of the Lord to my surviving offspring, that any of my children make it. You promised me you will show them the loving kindness of Yahweh. Man, that made David cry. They're both of these warriors confronted with their own reality, their own mortality. They weep together. They part, and David will never see Jonathan again. David will receive news of Jonathan's heroic death. He'll die. And the fool that thinks that David is going to be happy with this news, there's a fool who's an eyewitness to Jonathan's death and Saul. And he comes all gleefully in a hurry to David to give him the news, thinking he's going to be rewarded. The guy apparently lied also. David said, how do you know Saul is dead? And the guy said, because I finished him off. David said, and I suppose you think you're going to get a reward for this. And he gave the order, and this man Abishai took that guy's head off. David's big on heads coming off. And there are heads that need to come off in the world that we live in. It's a reality. But his brokenness causes him to write another song. He's a masterful musician, poet. And he can express his broken heart just about better than anyone. And he does it in a form that you and I can actually read and identify with and be grateful that he has been at the depths where we all visit. We get to the depths and we'll find in our darkest cave some inscription, David was here. Gives us hope. It's comforting. I don't want to hear about everybody's victories all the time, a constant, boasting of their victories. I want to hear about their defeats and how they live through it. I want to hear about their pain. People that suffer, people that know great pain, they find each other. And there can be, in fact, a deep brotherhood or sisterhood. David wrote a beautiful song. The whole nation knew that song, and it affected the whole nation toward David. When he wrote that, oh, how the mighty have fallen. I think about David, receiving the news, the details of Jonathan's death. Just having to get alone, pour out his soul into a song, which he did. So again, David hurts. He continues to hurt. You go to chapter 21, you'll see more pain there for David. He ends up at Nob. He's desperate. He's a man on the run. He's desperate for food, fuel for his flight. The priest, Abimelech, he cooperates. Not only does he cooperate in supplying David with food, David asks, is there no weapon? Is there any form of a weapon here? And the priest Abimelech says, well, there's nothing here. Well, except for that trophy sword, the one you took from Goliath. Well, that's a great moment. David goes, "God, give it to me. There is no other sword like it." Oh, the whole thing changes. It changes when you're unarmed and you're in grave danger, and then suddenly you are armed. Oh. I went to go seek the Lord at the invitation of a pastor at Kodiak Island. And I love being out in the forest. I do that in Maine. But in Maine, we have bears, but they're scared of us. They're just a black bear. And I'm pretty sure we could take them, hand to hand. Or at least we could make it so not worth it for the bear. Do you really want to eat me that bad? Because I'm going to hurt you in the process. And the bears are smart enough to go, "Yeah, you're right. You do your thing and I'll do mine." Occasionally I've run into bears in the woods and they're in a hurry to get away. And I'm grateful that they're in a hurry to get away. Kodiak, Alaska, the bears are as big as Goliath. The bears are enormous. They're all of them over 8 feet tall when they stand up on their legs. They eat people. I was out there trying to seek the Lord. I want to pray. I just want to pray. Got my Bible in my holster. I can't focus on anything because I keep looking for a bear to come out and he's going to eat me. One big and it's over. I did that one full day, one full nervous day out on the trails. And the next day, I came back with a 10mm Glock strapped onto this thigh with armor-piercing rounds in it. Oh, what a change in the whole week that one little piece of weaponry made. I think about that with this. I could pray and go, "Lord, send me a bear. Send me a bear out here." I'll put a cap in his head. I had such peace once I had that peace. I can relate to this moment for David here, where he's unarmed, he's got nothing, and then suddenly he's got the sword of all swords. Oh man, what a change in the story. He gets these little breaks, but then it's followed up by the horrifying news that the same priest that helped him and all of the priests of the Lord at Nob were all of them slaughtered by Saul's madness. Imagine the way his heart broke then, thinking of how fondly they helped him. And their helping him caused them to be accused of disloyalty to the king, and they're slaughtered. And there's always an evil character, a Doeg. That was the guy that did it, the guy that reported this aid that the priest gave, was also the scoundrel that went out with a sword and started beheading and just killing, slaying unarmed men. David has these enemies, he's got these characters. He has all of this pain. The priests are all murdered in chapter 22. Chapter 23 is interesting. Please turn there and let me just point a couple things out to you before we break for lunch, which is happening at what time, Josh? Yeah, that works. Just give me 15 more minutes, please. Chapter 23, verse 1. Then they told David, saying, "Behold, the Philistines fight against Keilah, and they rob the threshing floors." Then David inquired of the Lord, saying, "Shall I go and smite these Philistines?" And the Lord said unto David, "Go, smite the Philistines and save Keilah." So let me tell you something that happened. And you know about this from chapter 22. I kind of skipped over it, but in chapter 22, David makes this cave, this big cave system. He makes it his fortress. He makes a cave his stronghold. And while he's there in that cave, he has a bunch of losers join up with him. Word is out. He is not so well hidden. Word is out where they can find him, and they do find him. In verse 2 of chapter 22, it says, "Everyone that was in distress and everyone that was in debt, everyone that was discontented, they gathered themselves to him, and he became a captain over them, and there were with him about 400 men." So let me just reference back to this. David's alone. He's in a cave. And this band of losers begins to trickle in, and they all gather, and by the time the trickling is done, there's about 400 of them. At some point or another, David has to say to them, "What are you doing here? Why are you here?" And they got to all tell him their sob story about how things went bad for them. They're a bunch of losers. They're discontented and in debt, in distress. They've got troubles. They join him. At some point or another, this is all implied. I'm telling you, the implication is because they suddenly turn into, by the chapter 23, they are a band of warriors. They are a band of raiders. Their numbers grow to about 600, and they are unstoppable. They're led by Israel's hero. But how did they become that? How did these losers turn into that? It didn't happen by accident. It didn't just happen. I submit to you, the words, they joined themselves unto David, he became a captain over them. That means they submitted and they did what he said. I submit to you, friends, that boot camp was set up at the cave of Adullam, and training happened and discipline began. David had to give them the talk and say, this is going to be an army. And he looked around at that number and he goes, now some of you, you're going to stay back and you're going to cook food. I can tell by looking at you. Others of you are going to train. I'm going to tell you when to get up. I'm going to tell you when to go to bed. And I will tell you everything to do in between. And what are we going to do? We're going to train. We're going to drill. We're going to drill. We're going to learn skills. You're going to learn to throw rocks. You're going to throw rocks with both hands, left-handed and right-handed. You're going to learn these weapons. What are we going to do? We're not going to farm. We're on the run. We're not going into business. We're not going to become pirates. What are we going to do? We're going to train. And then we're going to use this training against Israel's enemies. We will help our people in this way and we will survive. So then you come to chapter 23, and I should mention that one of those that joined David at the cave at Adullam was the priest. The priest of the Lord has the Urim and the Thummim. He has the means the high priest would have to get a yes or no answer from Yahweh. So that's why we say, David inquired of the Lord. He hears this news that this Israeli city is being attacked by the Philistines. And David says, shall I go defend that city? And Yahweh answers through the priest, yes, go do it. Go save that city. It's amazing. David inquires of the Lord. That's a big break. But still, I want to remind you that he's still separated from everything. And the thing, check this out. Of all of the things that David will articulate that he misses the most, of all the things that David will lament being separated from, it's not Michael. It would not be Jonathan. It would be the house of the Lord. And he's prevented. He cannot go to the tabernacle. He cannot go to the tent of meeting. He can't go offer his sacrifice. He cannot go there and hear the praises of the priests. It would be the greatest source of pain. For that is who David is. And so it would be with you, being right with God. If you were alienated from God's people, if you were alienated from God's house, as it were, in the New Testament, I remind you, God's house is not this. God's house is this. It is not the natural place for you, being one of the Lord's sheep, to be alone, to be isolated. Now, the place for you and me is together with the rest of the flock in the care of our shepherd. David inquires of the Lord. He goes and rescues this town. Saul finds out. Saul sends all the armies of Israel. He sends his most elite. David finds out they're coming. He inquires of the Lord again. And he has to ask the Lord, if I stay here, will they turn me over to Saul? And so God gives him again an answer, yes, if you stay, they will. This is the thing about God that reveals to us. And this is one of the only places in the Bible where we can see this, that God's knowledge is so great that not only does he know the future, and he's the only one that does, he even knows the future that will not be. What a God is this? That he doesn't say, yeah, I think there's a pretty good chance that the men of Keilah will surrender you to Saul. He says that definite, yes, if you stay, they will. So David goes, well then, I will not stay. And he and his men escape again. There's one more thing I got to give you. I got about 7 minutes to do it. Chapter 24, verse 1. It came to pass when Saul was returned from following the Philistines, it was told him, saying, behold, David is in the wilderness of En-gedi. And Saul took 3,000 chosen men out of all Israel. He went to seek David and his men upon the rocks of the wild goats. En-gedi is really sort of an extended canyon. It's kind of only got one way in and one way out because the cliffs, they just continue to climb. The water has carved a canyon. Saul, realizing that David is up in that canyon, there is no way out. And so he pursues him and he takes the most elite. Verse 3 says, and he came to the sheepcotes. By the way, there was a cave, and Saul went in to cover his feet, and David and his men remained in the sides of the cave. What are the probabilities of this? What are the chances that of all of the places where Saul and his 3,000 arrive at, where Saul suddenly decides, he decides, or maybe he doesn't decide, maybe his body just tells him, you need to stop. You need refreshment. Now, there's some debate about what does this mean to cover his feet? And some believe, some of the commentators will tell you he just needed a break from the harsh sun. He needed to go in the coolness of the cave and rest. It's actually, I believe, less pretty than that. He actually has a long call. And he's the king, and he will not use a bush. Now this is very humiliating. That is for the king. So no doubt the guards all stand outside that cave. They don't send a guard into the cave to even see if it's secure. I see that mistake right there. That error was truly the Lord's doing. That was the Lord's doing. Tactically speaking, that was unwise. They know somewhere out there there's an enemy that they're in pursuit of. They don't even send men with torches into that cave to make sure it's a good place for the king to go to the bathroom. In that cave is David and his men. That means potentially there are 600 men in there. Maybe it's only a few of them, but they're in there against the sides. The king comes in, clearly his eyes are not adjusted to the darkness, and he has no idea, as he covers his feet, that he's not alone. Verse 4, look at this. The men of David said unto him, behold, the day of which the Lord said to thee, behold, I will deliver thine enemies into thine hand, that thou mayest do to him as it shall seem good unto thee. David arose and cut off the skirt of Saul's robe privily. It came to pass afterward that David's heart smote him that he had cut off Saul's skirt. And he said unto his men, the Lord forbid that I should do this thing unto my master, the Lord's anointed, and stretch forth my hand against him, seeing he is the anointed of the Lord. So David stayed his servants with these words and suffered them not to rise against Saul. Saul rose up out of the cave and went on his way. All right, so you know this, you're familiar with the story. Can I point out to you the relevance of this story to your life and mine? David's men recognized the hand of God was in this, that they did not scout out the cave, they just let the king come in here where they are. They were not wrong in recognizing that God was in this. They were not wrong in looking at the circumstances and seeing that God was involved. They were absolutely wrong about what it meant and what David should do. They believed this was David's opportunity to walk out of that cave with Saul's head as he walked up to Saul with Goliath's head. They were wrong. David did take action. David actually got close enough to Saul, and his blade is so sharp that he could slice off a piece of Saul's garment, and Saul isn't even aware of it. And even that much, just cutting the king's garment, smote his heart. He was so convicted. He was so guilt-ridden that he had done it. That was not all that his men wanted him to do. They wanted more than just the garment being cut. But David, with his words, and I'm amazed about this, that they were able to have these words. I'm going to, well, let me just submit to you the possibility that the weather wasn't really good outside. Either it's a hard driving rain or there's a strong wind howling. There are many things that can mask the sound. You know what it's like in this room when the heavy rain comes on this roof, to be able to talk over it or to hear anything. So I suggest to you the very real probability that there was some sort of background noise, perhaps wind outside, or perhaps it was the noise of the 3,000 outside that cave, funneling that sound into the cave. That these guys, David and his men, are able to have this exchange. And David's able to say all that he said. It was said. And David was right. What about you? Dear friend, are you able to recognize the hand of God in circumstances? Or are you guilty of misinterpreting the hand of God, or what appears to be like the hand of God? I'll say you've got a wife, and you are in a covenant, you're bound in that covenant, and suddenly you meet another one that you want better than her. Frightening a number of people convince themselves that God is in this. They'll say stupid things like how God led them out of their marriage. God brought them this person. It's a lie. And we convince ourselves of such lies. We'll tell ourselves things that we want to hear. We're guilty of this. If you find yourself in a place tempted to steal, you could even be working in ministry. You could be working for an employer, and suddenly you have an opportunity. Are you going to make the mistake of reading that as an opportunity that God is in, and fail to consider that it is an opportunity that God is in, providing you the opportunity to overcome and to do the right thing? You hear what I'm saying to you? I knew a pastor's son, a minister's son. He was close to me. And every time he found his dad leaving his wallet where he could get to it, he would clean it out. When he would find his father's money and see that his dad left it out in, say, the kitchen, he would open up and go, God is good. And he would sound like one of those evangelists on television and put it in his pocket. It was a little bit funny, but it was actually not funny. What would you do? I want you to think about that. If you have blown it, if you have failed, confess to the Lord and make it right. And then recognize when that opportunity comes again. When it comes around, you cannot look at your desperation of your circumstance and justify stealing. You cannot look at the desperation of your circumstance and with that make right out to yourself some kind of forgiveness before you commit the crime. You understand what I'm saying to you? David read the circumstances as an opportunity to show Saul mercy. And you know the story. You know the rest of the story. Saul would ultimately emerge from the cave, rejoin his men, and David would come out of that cave with that piece of garment as proof. And he's not even arrogant about this. His heart is broken. He's humble, having to say, I could have killed you. If I were your enemy, I'd have killed you. Can you not see I'm not your enemy? You've believed some lies about me. He made himself vulnerable, even coming out there. He put himself within arrow shot. And the king, then his heart smote him, and he was like, you're right, David, my son. And he has a moment of remorse, but it's not true repentance. But David continues to hurt, and that's where we leave him on our journey through his life. He continues to hurt, and he is still on the run. He is still separated from all that he loves. He's with a band of ugly men. He's with a band of warriors. Now they're racking up some victories, and they're experiencing the power of God. There's some pluses, there's some breaks. But I'm pointing out to you that this man, whom God says is a man after my own heart, God allows a man after his own heart to hurt. And God will allow a daughter who is a daughter after his own heart to hurt. God will allow you, his son. You're a man after his own heart. That doesn't mean you'll be free of pain. God will use the pain. Please believe that. He will use it. He's able. We know that he is able to cause all things to work together for the good of those who love him.